My mic is on. Roll call for school board members. All are present. So we'll move to 4.0 is to approve the agenda, and I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions or discussion on the agenda? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 5.0 communication reports. Start with enrollment update.
If you looked at your sheets, for the most part, we're down 2 kids from last month, and obviously we're done at this point, but we lost a kindergarten student and 1 9th grader. So that's where we're at.
I just
Yep.
have a question about that. So, I see that Owatonna is on here and we're moving away from that.
And so
And my question, just to make sure everyone, clarification on this. If kids still decide to go that route, they're not eligible for extracurricular.
that is not a true statement at
That's
this
not-
point. For the following school year, for 27, 28, the high school league has adopted that.
Okay, so there's still one more year.
So
of that.
there's one more year. We have in works going, as we've talked
Yep.
about, that we're taking it back in. They've started the registration process with those kids that are online. And our choice was they have to be halftime or full-time if they're gonna go. And again, Owatonna was full-time only.
Yep.
And again, the conversation of why is there are options, where people can go part-time or full. So that's where we're starting. Whether it changes a year from now, this is our
But the
first
high school league is adapting that policy.
correct down the road, correct. But there's one more year. If someone went to Owatonna, they could still, or went another public school online, they could still participate here.
Any other questions? 5.2 administration and department head reports. Superintendent.
Okay, just throwing a few things out. The negotiation group, if we could get together sometime, I emailed you kind of an idea, if we could just maybe even talk for 5-10 minutes after tonight would be great to move that forward. I did get word from the para group that they're not ready, and it's because of transition with the union itself, not our local. So it's probably gonna be towards fall. I think they lost like a business agent or whatever you wanna call it. So until we know more, it's not sitting on us. The policy committee, we did get, or in the process very soon are gonna get a bunch. So I will take a chunk again like we did before, email them out, and then we can talk if, we want to get together or whatever. But there's gonna be some over the next few months. I did get word late last week, so it's not on this board agenda. The union did approve, we updated the mentor program over the last year. Took some stuff out that wasn't being done, changed some stuff. So that'll be coming to you next month, just giving you a heads up that that's coming. Other than that, school ended. It was busy and still continues to be busy with admin and different groups doing some things. We actually have there's I think 41 scheduled, not just our group, but from surrounding schools. There's a behavior assessment on Wednesday for being offered, so some training. So we're in that full blown planning for the start of next year again. So it's all good.
All right. Okay, moving on to, or any questions I should ask? Okay, moving on to principals. So Sierra.
Okay. Hello,
Oh.
we made it. We did. So tonight I'm just going to kind of focus and we're going to start and share our just goals and results. So you have them in front of you, but I thought I would share them on here too for people to follow along. So for New Heights, our goal was that all students at New Heights will show measurable growth on the FastBridge reading assessment, aiming for a 3% overall increase in school-wide results by the end of that school year. Instruction and support will be adapted to meet diverse learning needs, so every student has an equitable opportunity to succeed. So when we go into our results, so this is our FastBridge assessment. Kindergarten and first grade take what's called the early reading, and second grade does the A reading, but it's all FastBridge. It's from the fall to the spring. And so kindergarten shows a 17% regression, first grade an 8% increase, and a second grade an 11% increase. So when you put those all together, overall, we had a 2% growth. So in the graphs below kind of just show, and it's based on benchmarks, which are those standards we want them to hit. So I'm going to dive into a little bit more to share some of that. So a couple of things I want to note. Kindergarten doesn't have the same subtests in the fall, winter, and spring. So you can see the only subtest that they have that's the same as letter sounds. I can't say for sure, but I imagine that plays a factor when you are comparing your composite from the fall to the spring compared to the other grades. I've reached out to FastBridge and asked them about the assessments, kind of the why behind the differences. They are actually going to look into it, and their research and development team is actually going to analyze my data because we are consistently going backwards, and I'm trying to figure out why. Is it that it's not a true picture because of the difference in assessments? Obviously, there's something there, right? So I'm not saying that we don't have some regression, but things don't quite add up, and especially that significant difference. So I will have the people who are professionals at that dive in a little bit more and get back to me on that. A little bit further into that. So when I dove into the data and I broke it down based on students, part of our goal was that we wanted all students to grow. And I know that might be unrealistic, but I will set a high standard because we need to get there. And so we did fall short, but we had 98% kids show growth. So to me, I mean, did I meet the 100? Nope, but 98% is awesome, and I will continue to aim for that 100 because that's important. The interesting piece is in kindergarten, while we show a 17% regression, not one kindergarten student had regressed growth. So what it's kind of telling you is like they grew, but they didn't grow to necessarily where FastBridge said they wanted them by the end of the year. Okay, so again, though, that data is telling us something, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Where is that discrepancy? What are we missing? I think we've figured out a few pieces, but I want to know more. I don't like the not knowing piece. So looking into that, first grade, we had 5 kids that showed some regression, and second grade, we had 2. So overall, 7 out of our 428, I think, is what we landed at. So that's a win. This page has a lot on there. I want you to kind of focus at the far column in the results. So one of the things that we talked about was some intentional work in analyzing our data from last year. One of the areas that we took a hit was our sight words. So we had intentional work put in our interventions that we run every single day for all students within sight words. So my title teachers, Pam and Kaylin, put together some slides that worked those sight words with FastBridge, but also what we kind of the list of sight words that they should see, and had intentional review of those daily within our intervention. Okay, and we had them broke it down by the months. So kindergarten, you'll see on the side, had a 9% growth. The tricky piece of this is I had to compare last year's kinders to this year because obviously we don't have, first grade doesn't test sight words, so I couldn't compare that. But there still showed a 9% growth in sight word from the kids last year in kindergarten to this year's. And then first grade had a 5% growth from fall to spring in terms of that. So that tells me our intentional work was valuable and important, and we will continue that. The intentional instruction on segmenting words into individual sounds with the assessment was another indicator that we noticed last year. And so we again put some effort into that. We got updated OG manuals, and we really broke down how they teach it. So it might sound silly, but if there's the word like flag, okay, in one assessment, the kids might put the sounds like full together, egg, but they want it to be broken down in FastBridge for the individual sounds. So sometimes that's confusing for kids. So we taught it how they, well, both ways, because we teach both ways, but we also focused on how the assessment is going to ask them to do it so that they got practice on that. So within that data, kindergarten had a 20%, 22% growth from fall to spring. First grade had a 15% growth from fall to spring. And then I did get to go back and analyze the first graders from their kindergarten year because they did get assessed on that in kindergarten last year, and they had a 19% growth from, if you looked from their kindergarten year to the first grade. So that was fun to see. And then vocabulary, we had a 1% growth in our work, but I will take that as error on my end because I don't think I had clear data collection on how we wanted to look at that. So in evaluating that, it's not that we won't still do our work with vocabulary. I just got to clean that up and how we document and how we retrieve that to see if our intentional work there made a difference. So that was a lot of data thrown at you in a very short time. Do you have questions for me? I want to preface how proud I am of my teachers. We had probably the most difficult year in my educational career ever, from a lot of facets and a lot of barriers, and just, it was a lot. And if you ask teachers, I think they will speak to that. And so the fact that we had growth, and even though kinder may not show one thing, there was growth within there. And I applaud them for that because that didn't happen without their intentional work. So I don't want the numbers to get hung up on. They trekked through an incredibly challenging year and gave it their all every single day. So I'm very thankful for their efforts and understand that a number doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture. So.
I wonder if you could disaggregate just the letter sound, see just the growth in that, since that's the only common test is
Yep.
that you can do it through FastBridge.
Probably, and we even for next year have a plan to look at, we're going to create something so that even though it's maybe not necessarily a part of FastBridge data, auto reading will look at letter sound, so we still can, but it won't adjust the composite score. So we're gonna, or in the works already of having that so that we can still have a pre and a post. It's kind of, when you look at the other grades, it's almost like, it feels like a pre and a post assessment for pre-K and first grade and even second, but it's not when you look at it then from the kindergarten lens because they don't have the same assessment. So it's kind of a head game and it can be confusing and interpreted in many different ways. But that's why I also reached out to FastBridge and said, can you help me and look at this? Because it's not by a lack of effort by any means, but we're missing something and we got to figure out where is this coming from. I did reach out to a couple other schools our size as well and just said, hey, what does your data look like in kindergarten in specific? I haven't heard back from a couple, but one said, oh, we scored atrocious. So they too were having that feeling in that kindergarten. So again, there's something there, but I just need to figure out what it is.
Is it different assessments used when you say that every student showed growth, but yet there was a 17%?
No, it's the same. Well, I mean, the sub-tests that they get tested in are different. You can see that on that slide. But it's not that they didn't have growth. It's just they didn't necessarily end where FastBridge claims they should end on their skills. Does that make sense?
So just to make sure we're all, you
Based
know, like
on-
when you started, if 60% were where they, are norm data for age level. At the end of the year, if they were still 60% at, you would have all made growth, but you would have made, you see what I'm saying? That they would still, you would hope, pick any number, if we start off and 50% are where they are as kindergarten should be. You'd like it to be 60% by the time the year's over. If 50
Sure.
do, it doesn't mean they didn't grow.
Sure.
They just,
Didn't grow according to that.
Their-
correct. I mean, they just a year's worth of growth, if you want to say it.
Yeah.
And there's still 50% of our kids are at now the end of kindergarten age, where whatever are 60, and they all grew some,
Sure.
but other places grew more, and so they become, instead of 60%, they're at the 45th percentile, or that type
Mhm.
of. And again, the whole goal of having the data is to now do what
Dig
is
in.
being
Yeah.
done,
Mhm.
figuring out how
Yeah.
do we get better?
Sure.
How do we move up? We can all improve. doesn't matter what we're working on. And so I mean, that's the piece that it's a bigger hurdle and next step.
Yeah, thanks for digging into that.
Yeah, that's a lot when you stare at numbers and charts and you dive
And I'm
into it.
sure when you saw that number at first, you were like,
I mean, I kind of expected it to an extent just because that's when I looked back, we were seeing, but I don't want to just settle for that,
Right.
what has been happening. I want to know, why does that continue to show that? Is it truly because of the different assessments that they're giving? Is it not? Is it more? I mean, there's got to be something.
Yeah.
So I just need to figure that out so that we can be intentional and continue to move forward.
Thank you for putting that together.
Yeah,
More of
thank
this
you.
would be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Now it's South Point's turn. All right, so our literacy goal for this last year was by spring 26, South Point will increase the percentage of students reading from the fall FastBridge A reading data grade level by 3%, which was at 33% to 36% through high fidelity use of OG and FastBridge in grade 3 and morphology, FastBridge and CAPTI in grades 4 through 5. And before I show you, I just wanted to preface of what you're looking at. The color codes at the bottom where it says high risk, some risk, low risk, and exceeds. We're going to be focusing on the low risk because that's what grade level you see here. So you can see we were at 33% and we actually went down to 31% in our spring. Looking at our median score though, I wanted to preface where we were at the increase across all 3 grade levels. We have met as a literacy team and have come up with our own reasoning, because I'm going to go further and show you what we've been doing with interventions. And we cannot quite figure out why we regressed as well. And the most that we can come up with is that we think maybe it's fatigue, because they've just come off of, this is the last big assessment that they have taken. They've just come off of MCAs. My 4th and 5th, they're also doing CAPTI, which I'll elaborate a little more on shortly. But if they're just clicking through, because we don't feel this truly reflects what that data should be. Just also showing what our math goal was very similar. Again, we're using that fall FastBridge A math benchmark data at grade level by 3%, going from 36 to 39 through the high fidelity use of IXL and of course our Bridges math curriculum. So you can see we were at 36% and did increase to 38. So we just came short just by a percentage there. But again, that median student score, looking at those grade levels from 3, 4, and 5, did increase. I wanted to reflect on interventions because that played a major role in our literacy goal this year. 3rd grade used Orton Gillingham as their intervention piece. And so just letting you know, that highly structured approach focused on the parts of the whole, breaking words down into that more manageable parts, beginning with sounds and letters. Because of that, we were able to put students in groups, in their intervention groups, according to where they were at. So meeting them explicitly where they're at. They might be starting on lesson 1, they might be starting on lesson 50 and going up. Provide support for what they're missing, works with peers at the same level. They're not competing, not feeling like I'm not understanding what's happening. They're in a small group with those peers that are where they're at as well. And they're having that 25 minutes of direct instruction each day, focusing on that target skill. And they're at the pace they need, which is really nice with our intervention. So if a lesson should take you roughly a week as you're going through it, but because we're an intervention, you're not teaching to the whole, you're teaching just to that group. So some of our lessons may go, instead of the 5 days, we're going 8 or even 10 days, 2 weeks, because we wanted to make sure that they were understanding it because that's the piece that they were missing and needed. But growth was made for every student. Every student in third grade was able to move. For my fourth and fifth grade, they did CAPTI. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that throughout the year. That's that diagnostic reading assessment for our secondary students that quickly identifies as those roots caused of their reading difficulties. This is what it measures. There's 6 components, 6 foundational components of reading. It's the word recognition and decoding, vocabulary, morphology, sentence processing, reading efficiency, and reading comprehension. And this last year, we were only required to do 4 of the 6. So we didn't have to do the sentence processing or the reading comprehension. But coming next year, grades 4 through 12 will have to do that all 6. So we will be doing all 6 next year. So I want to show you what that looks like. I also want to preface that the first half of the year, we actually were using FastBridge data to assess where our kids were at because CAPTI was brand new to us and our teachers were learning it. So after PD information, once we hit that second semester, that winter benchmark, we took that data and then made the small groups according to that. So what I'm going to show you now, which I'm very excited about, only reflects that information or how we did those groups from January on. So the first one is word recognition and decoding. So if you were in a group there, so the BOY is beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, you can see how we closed the gap there. 60% down to 28%. So these red, we want to go down as we go to the end of the year, where the blue, we want to go up as we're going across. Vocabulary, 66%. By the end of the school year, we're at 36%. Word recognition and decoding, 60% down to 28%. And those are like very high risk, those areas in the red. And then vocabulary, 66% down to 36%. So really closing that gap. So we're really pleased with CAPTI. Going forward next year, we won't be using FastBridge for fourth and fifth at all. We will be using CAPTI because we feel it truly targets, gives us the information we need, and we can help fill in those gaps for those students. I believe that is what I have. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. That was,
Mm.
yep, I apologize. That was fourth grade. In fifth grade, you can see. So I must have showed. So 61 to 31, 72 to 43. I forgot I broke them down in as I was speaking. So fifth grade, 49 down to 31%. Vocabulary 55 down to 41. That morphology 57 down to 30%. Then increase over here 17 up to 30%. 74 down to 45. So you can just see how much it's targeting, and those kids are getting what they need, and it's just very explicit on what they need and how we can support them.
What are you using during?
I'm sorry.
What curriculum are you using?
So we found a lot of our students in fourth and fifth are really falling. Sorry, on the tip of my tongue, I could have told you. We're using the rewards program because they are falling in that multisyllabic word challenge. That's where we saw the biggest. Some of our SPED students are still, we might use OG for that purpose as well. So, but rewards was a big program that we were using that next year. Again, just another program that is very explicit and also recommended through the state of Minnesota. And so we were able to pilot that this year and found great success with that as well. So looking forward to moving ahead. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, as Sierra had stated, really hats off to our staff for all of their hard work of putting in. I mean, it did take extra time and extra energy to put those groups together and find that explicit instruction. And they really did a fantastic job and can't say enough of how hard they worked this year for that.
Thank you.
All right, hello, everybody. Talk about the middle school. Our goal this year was going to be, it's actually comparing our fall to our winter because we wanted to catch students as soon as possible. And so we really spent most of our time looking at our winter scores. But by the Winter Star Reading Assessment window, 70% of all students will demonstrate a student growth percentile of 35 or higher, and I'll explain that in a second, indicating meaningful growth from fall to winter. Students already showing growth will be expected to continue progressing, while those not yet meeting growth targets will be closely monitored and supported through timely interventions provided during enrichment time, ensuring all students have equitable opportunities to improve. I will jump into that growth percentile, but what was decided was to do measurements based on our growth rather than our proficiencies. However, I will share our proficiencies as well. And so our reading goal, we did meet that our student growth percentile, meaning that if you took 100 students, if I took 100 sixth graders and lined them up and showed the students that made the least growth, being that number, would be a 1, to that student that made the most growth in a year, making more than a year's worth of growth, would be like that 99. 70% of our sixth graders, seventh graders, and 76% of our eighth graders showed growth over the from fall to winter with an overall of 72.6. The actual proficiencies, meaning if we were to do a little bit more, we're at grade level versus not. When we started in the fall, we were at 27% proficient in our reading in the sixth grade, jumped to 46% proficient based on our STAR exam at the end of the year. Seventh grade from 32% proficient to 41, and eighth grade from 32 to 52. Our biggest increases were between that fall and winter, and then kind of settled in between winter and spring. So we have to do a little looking at what happened between January and the end of the school year. It's this showing that we're still growing, but just not faster than the other seventh graders in the state or the other eighth graders in the state. The median growth percentile, again, looking at the beginning of that year or the beginning of the year from fall to winter, we were above, meaning that our students were growing faster than your average sixth, seventh, eighth grade. Not a lot, but they were growing a little bit quicker. Sixth grade had a huge, like they continued to grow based on that throughout the year, getting up to that 65th, which is, I'm gonna say high for when you look at a whole 150 students. But then our seventh and eighth graders started to slip a little bit at the end of the year. So again, something we've got to figure out what we're doing or what has changed between January and May when we took that winter versus our spring. So mine's quick, and I'm not going to talk too much about what Mel was talking about. Where we are at in the secondary is we're a year behind in the READ Act. And so as these were all from our STAR, which is from the same company as Fastbridge, and from our secondary schools. However, we are also moving away from STAR reading and math for next year to do CAPT for our reading, again, to align with the READ Act, as well as align with South Point and the senior high, and trying to get the district onto a similar assessment or the same assessment it is for that CAPT from that 4th to 12th grade, so that we can watch that growth from students from year to year, rather than when we transition from like Fastbridge to STAR, the 5th grade numbers don't necessarily match the 6th grade numbers just because it's a different assessment. Same thing with math, moving to IXL has now been approved by the state as a math, I don't want to say curriculum, assessment screener, thank you, to just watch for that. So moving away from a STAR and going to CAPT, which is required by the state, and then IXL is something we actually already had, so we were able to kind of cut out a subscription along with this as well. Any questions about the middle school at this point?
Are you starting interventions next year?
Yep, it'll be a much more purposeful through our Achievement Integration Grant. We were able to get the reading interventionist. And we also got our getting access to Lexia Power Up, which will be our intervention curriculum, which will be used in intervention and in some special education as well. The nice thing about Lexia for us, just like Mel was talking about rewards, Lexia is your one-stop shop. All of the areas that are needed to be hit by the READ Act. Lexia covers every single one of them. There's only 2 of them, I believe, that have been approved by the state of Minnesota to cover every single area at the secondary level. And Lexia is the one that I honestly feel more strongly about, as well as about a half of the price as the other one. And so we are going to try to focus on that Lexia Power Up. Students will be getting more purposeful reading intervention for the ones that are identified by our CAPTE. And so we will be full-fledged READ Act, ready to go next year.
And I think there's a piece, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but wasn't it multisyllabic, which was a huge area? You know, it's a piece we're noticing as a district.
Mhm.
It is, again, a shortfall, because the middle school kids, when we were looking at the different areas from CAPTE,
Mhm.
that was the major area again.
Yep.
So it's a piece that,
Yep, that multisyllabic was our largest area identified as well. But we also have students that are struggling with I'm gonna say a first, second grade level. And so trying to teach 6th grade content to someone reading at a 2nd grade level, very difficult. So hopefully these interventions, and not hopefully, I truly do think it'll be a good when all is said and done, will really get them to grow. It might take us a while to catch up. It's probably not a 1-year fix by any means. It's the long game, but I think good things to come, or more good things to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go, Park Hopper. Thank you.
Okay, we don't have the draft. Elementaries have, holy cow, it was nice. You can follow along right there if you would, and I'll just go through the little slide here. Okay, good news. We had a little roller coaster go on, last year. Good news in the fall, we had decent scores, obviously. You can see there 53 for the 9th graders, 50 for the 10th, and 48 for the 11th grade. And then it was not so great in the spring, 29.5, 40.3, and 40.3 for the sophomores and juniors. And we got a little better. Good news again. You can see that the students did not make the STAR test at the CAPTE, 4 tests, and they were pretty good again. 52 word recognition, 65, 61 morphology, and 52 for efficiency. So we're doing this thing through the high school. And we have some really good news. We are happy to announce that we've hired a reading interventionist, Kristen Stenberg, who's taught English here for a while. Will be taking over that role. And basically the students that need help from her, they'll be put into learning labs. And she will get, for example, say there's 12 kids in that class that need help with their reading skills. For half of the hour, 25 minutes, 6 of them will go to her. They'll go back to the learning lab, then a new 6 come to her for the end of that. And as soon as they test out of it and get better, they can then stay in learning lab the whole time. So they will not lose any class time. There'll be one of their 8 classes will be a learning lab. So it's going to fit in perfect. We're excited about it. And she'll do a great job. So that's our plan. And for that, and then next year you can see we're not using STAR testing at senior high school, using CAPTE and MCA scores to determine intervention needs. And our special ed teachers plus our interventionists trained on how to use Lexia with our students who may need extra help in the long run. So, like I said, that's the high school. And we're going to try to get better, obviously. We have a pretty good plan. So, any questions, anybody about that? Thank you.
Thank you.
So our big news with school readiness is that we did fast bridge testing this year, which was a first for the little ones. So just trying to align ourselves more closely with the K-12 programming. So that was essentially our goal to start since we didn't have previous fast bridge data. And so you can see the different areas that were tested in the fall, the concepts of print, onset sounds, and letter names. And similarly to kindergarten, you can see in the spring that that changes a little bit. So then we have letter sounds, onset sounds again, and letter names. So our data also shuffles a little bit as we have different tests because of adding in that letter sounds. But we were really pleased with our data. So we did not test in the winter. Since this was our first go around, next year I would anticipate that we will test in the winter. So you can see the red, that would be the children that were at high risk. So you can see that it went from 1% in the fall to 5%. That's because we added that letter sounds in. And so some kids just aren't quite ready for that yet or hadn't made as much growth with that yet. But the low risk or the moderate risk, I guess the yellow, that stayed the same at 4% fall to spring. And then you can see that the meets in that green went down just slightly, but the exceeds went up. So that was exciting. So we have a very low group of children that, or very small group of children that are at higher risk. And then this shows the overall growth from fall to spring. So the darkest pink is the flat growth. So kids that made very little or no growth. And then 15% would be the modest growth. Typical growth would be that darker purple. And then we call the aggressive growth that light purple. So really a lot of kids that made some major growth in their beginning literacy learning. So yes, next year we will plan to assess 3 times like the elementaries, but hope for great growth again and to set them up for those kindergarten tests. So when they go to kindergarten, they take, I'll just skip back here, but they take the concepts of print, the onset sounds, the letter names, the letter sounds. So those same tests they'll take next year in kindergarten. You have any questions?
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 5.3 is committee reports. Any?
I don't have anything other than, like I said, if we could grab 10 minutes at the end with the one group and the policy group, we'll be getting some stuff in the next week or so to start looking at.
6.0 is a consent agenda and I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 7.0 is opportunity for citizens to speak. Right. 8.0 is district business. 8.1 is to approve the long-term planning task force recommendation dated May 11th, 2026. The task force referendum recommendation is presented and attached. So that is from last time. I'll move to approve and then
I'll second.
And then we'll talk. All right, questions and discussion. This is the recommendation about the questions on the levy and referendum and
Correct. So what's in front of you is what was presented last time. Rob is with us again. If you have questions of him, myself, the administrative team. And again, if you recall, there's 2 pieces to it there. And that's why if you looked, I did modify the language a little bit today because we wanted to make sure it was clear. We slightly modified it. It meets the survey and meets the community task force recommendation, but we adjusted the number to keep that one referendum flat. So it generated a little bit more money. We also, you'll notice the contingency. We put a contingency on the, I'm going to call it 3rd question, couldn't pass unless the second one, your main one to I'm gonna say update the plumbing, the HVAC, the water, you know, the major one. It is more crucial, if that's the right way, before we start doing some extra modification for what we're gonna call the preschool, you know, getting them in a specific site. Other than that, I guess it's open for conversation. There's questions I've answered. Nothing came to me, you know, we said by the,
Yeah.
or if you wanted more data, you know, specific, I've had conversations with 3 out of the board, you know, on different things that have come up, but nothing specific. So,
Rob, can you share the makeup of the task force? Like, were there teachers on there? Who
Yeah.
was all participating in that?
Great question. So we had, as it relates to a recommendation from the board and some of the administration, the initial folks that were asked to participate. And then I was able to go into the community after I had met with those individuals that you all recommended and meet with others. And so there were parents, teachers, business owners, farmers, you know, city officials,
students,
students. We had 4 students, if I remember correctly, on the task force. So it was a nice makeup that represented the community.
Were there teachers of all levels?
all
Uh,
buildings,
All
correct?
buildings
All
had
buil-
representation?
I
Yeah.
don't know that we had teachers. I don't know if they,
Yes?
But there, keep in mind, like even admin wise was not part, you know, like I attended the meeting, Sierra and Melissa attended, not voting members of the
Yeah.
task force. You know, the same thing, Matt hosted one, was there for that one. Again, we're there, but again, it's not ours. There was, you know, a preschool teacher, there was an element, you know, trying to get from each group. But again, it wasn't to be driven by, you know, staff, if that's the right way to say it.
Mhm.
yeah, and purposefully, there were not many teachers. And, you know, our principals, they were there for their pieces. When we had building tours as a, for instance, you know, Mill and Sierra were there for the one at South Point. And then when we were at the middle school, Matt was available for that tour. And then Kevin kicked us off. Generally speaking, it was led by myself and then of course the group.
Does an approval of this state anywhere that the preschool would be at New High specifically, or would it be still?
It doesn't state that. I mean, the idea is getting it in a single spot.
Yeah, just
You-
a single
you-
location, not just necessarily a specific location, correct?
And again, where that came from, again, the original, we had 2 options originally. One was to add a piece onto a building and another piece was a standalone facility. And then as we got through discussion, and again, this came from the administrative group going, you know, and how do I say it politely? You know, the figures were a little, I'm gonna say sticker shock, to be honest. And so we started looking at, is there a way to fit in, you know, to current building? And we understand the buildings are tight. Okay, but on the other hand, if you recall, we have made some reductions. So for instance, and I'm just gonna speak, if New Heights was used and we did like a pre-K 1, New Heights lost 3 staff, 3 rooms this year, okay, in reductions. If preschool came out of South Point, okay, that would free up, correct me, 3 rooms, right, Melissa? Yeah, correct. So again, taking like second grade over, there still becomes a, how do I say it, with 5th grade going out, it opens up space there.
Mm.
Okay, so New Heights becomes better with space. There's not a lot of extra room. Matt's is the one that takes on more kids and more staff, but they have 4 rooms right now being used, 3 for preschool and 1, I call it the wrestling room or that they use. And then through some minor tweaking, we add some office space, which opens up some classrooms. And then the high school, unfortunately, like with next year's group going out, and with a little bit of attrition this year, is going to have more space than it did. So that's where the conversation came about, how do we get in one building and what makes, I'm going to say quote unquote, the most sense. Nothing set in stone,
Right.
but again, putting preschool with middle school kids, is that the best situation? And then you can argue different ways. You know, there are, and I throw it out, there are 5 through 8 middle schools. I know that was one, and people that were at the task force conversation, it was, I think, in Matt's building. That was the biggest that came up right away was fifth grade. Should it be with sixth, seventh and eighth grade kids? Again, we've had some conversations. We've come up with some ideas of trying to have a 5, 6 and a 7, 8, you know, to help alleviate some of that. But there are 5, 8 buildings. There are actually, I found K1 buildings. I'm not gonna say it's the majority of places, but it can be, you know, just like high school. There's 10, 12, there's 9, 12, there's 7, 12, there's pre-K 12 in buildings. It's how do we do the programming, I think, which is gonna be the piece down the road
What do you mean by programming?
of how you operate and what you offer. You know, we've even, and again, this is getting more into the granular. We've talked about fifth and sixth. Can you do where, you know, there's places that share teachers, like one teacher might teach math and science. You know, there's different ways of doing things. Now, again, I understand change should be talked about, but again, that, we haven't got to that level because again, that if we get there can go down to, you know, I've even thrown out at the middle school, you know, should you have more than one teacher teaching math? You know, have them, you know, have a little change, you know, maybe you teach some sixth and some seventh or some seventh and some eighth. Licensing, not an issue. Again, most high school licenses are 5, 8, most elementary are up through sixth grade. Some are 7, 12, I should say, the older high school license. So I mean, we think we can staff it. The specials, meaning prep coverage, again, it's a piece, the middle school has more gym space. That was the big one that came out. You know, do we have enough space? Because if you put another grade at one of the other buildings and include gym, you're probably gonna add some of that space too that's needed. So, that's just kind of the round robin of questioning and conversation and
What are the requirements going forward for like preschool?
We
Like state
will need-
requirements?
I think it's 2 years and where's Laura, we have to have licensed teachers, right? So they will be contract teachers, not that they aren't now, they fall under the
Yep.
contract, but state of Minnesota for the 4-year-old VPK program, they have to be.
Are they required to, is there a requirement that like preschool now has to do like gym and library, music? Is that a requirement?
No.
It's not required?
But we need prep coverage, you
Yep.
know, and so, I mean, why wouldn't you have FIAD? Why wouldn't you have library, music, you know, the same type specials, if that's, you know, the right way to say, not that you have to, but we see it as being 3 grades in each of the Colma Elementary buildings, 4 in the middle school and 4 in the high school, and you would cover prep the same way, not that they can't change. You know, I'm guessing they're like at, New Heights, you have the smart gym, you know, that's been quite a while, but it wasn't forever. Sometimes something changed, so I don't want to guarantee the same things forever, because, you know, we've talked about, you know, some STEM type offerings somewhere, you know, could that be a prep at some, you know, prep coverage? So, I mean,
I guess my biggest concern is making such a drastic shift with all of our buildings. It's a huge concern, and there's a lot of people since last meeting that have reached out to me because of it. And not just teachers, but community members as well. And so that makes me really, really pause and really want to make sure that the decision that we make is not something that, hey, we're just shifting our space that we have
Mhm.
to another building and shifting our problems that we have to another building. That to me is really concerning, you know, looking at the proposal that as it sits right now with fifth grade moving up, and probably more so with shifting another grade out of New Heights. I think that is, you know, we're in a position in our district where we're housing a lot of special ed kids, twice the state level.
Mhm.
And those kids, especially at that level, they need space. And that was the biggest challenge for New Heights and South Point this year. And yes, you're gonna have a room open, but it sounds like we're filling it right away, you know? And so in order for this to work, I just don't see how this works in this proposal. I mean, that's just my opinion. And I was starting to get that before I was starting to get phone calls and before emails were starting to happen. And I guess without seeing the exact plan on paper and the drawings and what that concept looks like, it's gonna be really hard for me to get on board with that.
what do you mean as far as drawings?
Like, what does that look like? What does fifth grade look like? What does
We have-
preschool look like? And, you know, there's other things, you know, like the staff requirements for preschool are way different than they are for first, kindergarten, first and second, as far as special ed and speech and title and stuff like that. And then what does the staff look like? And I get it, we can move staff around here and there, but it just seems like we're making a big push to make this happen. And is this going to set us up in the short term? I think that it probably sets us up financially, probably better.
Mhm.
But in the long term, is it going to be detrimental if we run out of space again? And then,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that would be my biggest concern,
Mhm.
because short term wise, numbers and all that stuff, this works. And it probably stays in a very tight budget, but are we setting ourselves up for no space in 5 to 10 years? If we are one of the places where our special ed program is really thriving compared to others. And I say that because of the numbers that we have. So people in the outlying communities are moving here because of that program.
Mhm.
And those numbers don't look like they're going to be going down. And so not having adequate space for that, especially at the elementary school, really makes me pause a lot on this as it sits.
Well, we need that at the middle school too.
Right. Yeah.
And then you would need different degrees of it at the middle school if you're moving fifth grade up.
Yes.
So
But if
I
you-
would, but I would like to, I would like to see a drawing of it. You talked about like almost having like two different schools, like two different hubs, so if you would, like fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth.
Yeah.
I would like to see a drawing of that too, because I'm having, like, even when I go back, like in the book, like we talked about earlier, I am not picturing that, and I would like to see that, because I think that would be helpful for us who are struggling with that concept, because when I think, okay, you're moving 3 preschool, classrooms out, you're moving the wrestling room, that's 4. Maybe you're shifting the office, okay, but then you're taking 2 classrooms, you're moving 5 classrooms in. Where's everything going?
And
I-
one more thing. The other thing about, and this is just my opinion,
Mhm.
right? Within our school district, we don't need a Porsche, right? We don't need the best of the best for our schools. I mean, everyone wants that, and everyone would absolutely think that would be the best and the greatest. We just need functioning space, and we just need,
Enough of
a Chevy, a Chevy pickup is all we need. We don't need a Porsche as far as the design and all the bells and whistles in the school. I think that our teachers are really good at adjusting to that space and adjusting to the spaces and the areas that they have. And so that would be my,
Reliable.
yeah,
Yeah, if I may.
yep, you can go.
Okay, thanks. And so initially, we were talking about my commitment to the board, to the administration was good, better, best. Let's talk about the Porsche to your point, but let's also talk about not even the Chevy Silverado. Let's talk about the Chevy Colorado, right? And as we went through working with the community and the community survey and just gathering that information, and frankly, working with your principals, working with Kevin, working with the team, the concept that we have now is that Chevy Colorado, but it's not, what we did is we listened to your principals. Matt, Sierra, Mel participated, Kevin was there. I mean, we just had a really good conversation, just let them talk. And we took that information on what would be best from a programming standpoint, but also from a flow perspective and making best use of the space you have. Because talking to your community, the Porsche would be having a preschool building off by itself, off to
Mhm.
the side.
Sure.
Your community thinks it's a great idea, but they can't afford it. Absolutely can't afford it. And then we talked about, so what about these additions and really boiling it down? And even that was, questionable. And so the administrative team came together and said, well, what if we brought 5th grade to the middle school? Then we heard from the task force, well, my gosh, you can't bring 5th grade in with 8th grade because that's not going to work great. And so we went back to the drawing board and with the middle school as you have it, basically divide it in half, closed doors. So you've got 5th and 6th grade together, essentially creates a house, but they're isolated enough so that you have 5th grade and 6th grade. And then on the other side of the building with that divided door, you have 7th and 8th. So very little, if at all, will they blend. You make a very good point about special education. And, you have the needs that you do. But from whether it's an operational efficiency standpoint or from a para standpoint, when we have pre-K with kindergarten and first grade together, there's efficiencies. We just heard Sierra, well, and Mel and Laura and I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Bruce.
Bruce, thank you. You know, all talk about their reading. And ultimately, we have preschool now taking FastBridge. And, you know, Sierra was talking about all that work that she's putting in. So to have that handshake, that efficiency and consistency at that level, because then your preschool kids are in the building they're going to be in. So then from a transition standpoint, you're better off, those kids are even better off. And the number of classrooms that you're going to need ultimately, special ed we can talk about separately, but in a building by building basis, because you have the preschool in with kindergarten and first grade, the number of rooms versus having your preschool spread all over the place actually goes down. Not by a lot, but it goes down because of the efficiency. The number of pairs that you need, because you have everybody in one spot versus preschool in 3 different locations, that potentially could go down. There's efficiencies. Special education. I mean, there's at the middle school, where's Matt?
That's been
22 kids you have coming over to the middle schools that are special needs? Is that what you said?
I was just working on it. We will have, well, you're testing
What's close, right?
we will have 90 students on IEP.
Mhm.
Right around 90 to 100 students on IEP in middle school next year.
And so ultimately that number of special needs kids, you know, you have a wonderful school and your special education program will continue to, if you will, be at the levels that it is. But I see it thriving more so than if you have preschool spread all over the place. Because you're taking, is it 7 classrooms today for pre-K?
with Super K.
And so with all of that spread all over the place, we talk about, you know, questioning 5th and 8th together, but you've already got 4-year-olds with 8th grade. You know, and so there's that dichotomy there that's potentially a bit of a challenge. And so when we look at what your community will support financially as well as from a overall design standpoint, we believe that those that are, or I believe that those that are questioning the 5th grade with the 8th grade haven't seen the split, if you will, the creation of the 5th grade.
Yeah, and I looked it up. There's like 230 some districts that have 5 through 8 in the state of Minnesota right now currently.
The
Mo-
drawing issue's not because he had it last time.
Yep.
We can share, I mean, that's
So-
part of that presentation with the,
Okay.
you know, again, it's
Yeah.
at a high level.
We can't, so it wouldn't be an option, or is that not an option to put a wing on New Heights of like 6 classrooms?
Yeah, absolutely, we have that. And the challenge though is that so here's the thing, you as a board, you have several options where you can just take board action and fund construction. You have something called lease levy. You can add 10% of your building square footage to a building in your district. So you could do that. But if the relationship you have with your voting public is important to you, you might want to think twice about doing that. You could do that if you so chose. You could add this wing on if you wanted. But then what happens in the future if you're looking for an operational levy? You know, so
Here's what I think maybe some of the problem is, and I might be putting words in mouths, so.
That's okay. I did it already, so.
You-
yeah.
What's your title in life? At your job? You're
Supervisor,
of operations.
yes.
Yeah, you're a civil engineer. I'm a VP of ops. You're an administrator, and we are having trouble operationalizing this.
Okay.
Right? So I think, what we need of some sort is like, and you have a big booklet of it, but it is so big and it is so fruitful that we are having trouble, like, okay, we have these plans, but we don't have like, how is special ed gonna fit in there?
And you can't
How?
really see the plans either. They're so little.
Say again?
The plans are so little to read.
Oh,
Some stuff.
I mean, readers. But, you know, like, how are you gonna do specials? How are you gonna have the different types of special ed at the middle school? How are you gonna have preschool do the special? How are you gonna do all this? And this is so important to get right. Like, I don't feel-
Recess in fifth grade.
Right.
But
They don't even have a place, like a jungle gym over there.
But
Like,
again, it was a piece we talked about, and,
Yeah.
and, you know, that becomes, you know, at what level? We can do a working session and go through
Yeah,
a lot
we
about,
need to.
Matt brought up fifth grade and how can we have a spot, and maybe we even include sixth grade as a win for some recess. You know, again, you know, getting preschool all in one place, part of a plan was they can have appropriate, you know, smaller playground fenced in area in one site instead of trying to do in two, you know, separate sites. So again, down to the exact schedule for.
no, I don't.
No, I'm just saying we haven't got that granular other than coming up with, you know, the admin team thinking it can work. And when I say thinking, confident it can work. But like I say, to answer every question, we probably should schedule a work session and let's start working through what, again, the team has sat. And again, not just this group, but with the task force, because a lot of the questions, I don't think there's a question that hasn't been asked, you know, that at least been thrown out. Just like you said, the fifth grade, you know, thing as part of the task force meeting, several parents right off the bat came up with, oh, I don't know. And then as talk through, not saying they're 100% convinced
Mhm.
with, good point that you have preschool compared to, Tammy, were you at that? You know, and not saying 100% on board or not, but went, good point. The student, a girl brought it up. Doesn't matter what her name.
Oh, yeah, and I think there's levels of, hey, I like that idea and I like this idea. There's levels at every school with
Yep.
all those things.
Correct.
And like I just said, it feels like we're trying to rush through this thing so we can hammer this thing out next summer. And if we don't get there, we don't get there. I would rather do it right.
Yeah.
100%.
And,
Down the
It-
road.
yeah,
And the nice thing is,
right.
we have time. If you all chose to go to referendum, you wouldn't have to pass a resolution until August. So we have that time to, you know, work with Kevin, work with the admin team and put pen to paper with some of these things that operationally, you know, you all have questions about. It may be helpful if each of you, whatever your questions are, maybe share them with Kevin and then we can get to work. You know, it,
was easier in a setting like this to.
Yeah, I think a
question,
working
Because the
session.
conversation brings up questions. It's not like,
Yeah.
And then you can hear it at once.
yeah, I have more questions now than I did earlier.
Yep.
Or more thoughts than I did earlier because more conversations had. I think it needs to be like a working session, not just a, here's my questions
Yeah.
type of situation.
okay.
I think that the process was really good from the start of getting people involved, getting the community involved, getting staff involved. How we came to the decision, to rearrange everything, to find the space. I mean, I commend all the people that were involved in that, of thinking outside the box, of coming up with that as a solution, especially when you looked at the results of the survey, that showed us what the community wants, what the community is feeling.
Mhm.
I think everything that was great of how we got to that solution. But I think what we're realizing now is just such drastic changes, and we're feeling pushback. And I know the community and the survey supported that. What I'm feeling now is that there's not maybe as much support internally from our school system. In that it is, when you take a step back and look at it, it is some really drastic changes, and we have all these questions. Some of them have been answered, but I agree. I think it's best maybe just to take a step back. We have a work session. The other thought I have is, from the start of this discussion, before Nexus was involved, we always envisioned a standalone or an addition for preschool, because we always talked about how little of space we have in our schools. I understand that we found these spaces that are available that we're not utilizing the best. And I think that's kind of what you guys specialize in. And that's one of the reasons why we did go with you.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate that. But again, I'm questioning if that is the long-term solution, like Josh said, or if it's our solution for now. And if it is going to cost as much as the price tag shows, maybe we are better with just trying to ask for a little more from the community to put an addition on, to give us to give us more room that we all feel comfortable about with for a 10 to 20-year solution for the schools?
So the benefit of the survey, when we test, we provide not just options, but we provide buckets, mechanical, electrical systems, the plumbing systems, roofing, education, the preschool. When we test all that, we receive feedback from your community on each of those individual buckets. And ultimately, they provide priority from their perspectives on, if we're going to give you money, what are those things you should invest in first? And so we have that information. The flip side of the survey is tax tolerance. How much are you willing to invest in your schools? And we know that as well. And basically, when we did the survey, we asked about $24 million at, I forget, it was 200 and something dollars.
250 per kid.
On the average, well, no, on the
Oh.
capital side. I think it was like 211 or something like that per
house.
year for a.
Oh, for a $300,000 house.
Yeah, which is average in your community when we did the survey. And so we certainly could ask for more, but the challenge is that the higher you go with items that are perhaps not as much of a priority, the likelihood of passage is less. And so the 24, we tested, now it's 26.4 in working with Ellers, who's your financial advisor. They had some debt falling off, which they didn't take into consideration, but when we leverage that space, it adds $2.4 million at the same tax impact. You are the board. I'm just here to support. At the end of the day, you guys can ask for whatever you want professionally. And I've been doing this since '94. When we exceed the tax impact or that threshold by your community and focus on priority items that aren't as high on the list as the other things the community told us, the chances of passage is less. And sometimes it's considerably less. Right now, with the 26.4 and the work at the middle school and that preschool work for New Heights, we're asking for, according to the recommendation, it's $5.1 million. That is by far the lowest dollar amount and ultimately tax impact that we could put forward to your community and have things be the way you want operationally. You all have a lot of great questions and a lot of you are operational people. And I apologize for not being more prepared. Perhaps I should have been, that's on me. But ultimately, if you ask for more, the chances of passage, especially for a preschool, will go down.
I just want to clarify one thing too. So it started this year that the state is now funding preschool, correct?
No, VPK with us, it started 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
It's been around for, don't quote me, 6 years, 8 years. It's just not every school.
It didn't get to our
qualifies.
school.
Correct. So I think Josh is talking about LTFM pre-K funding.
Well, as long as VPK has been around, I believe that has been an option that you can use LTFM money for VPK to not do additions, to remodel, I believe, right?
No, but just in general, like,
We got funding last year.
right, we
for the
got.
first year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, we got funding for preschool for the first time this year from the state.
Paying for students.
Yes, paying
Yeah.
for students, that part of it.
Yeah, we're not talking about.
And so I just wanted to make sure that that's clarified. Like, that's why, now if we're looking at a preschool place, we're getting funding. So there is funding for that now.
You would get funding regardless.
Right. Well, we haven't
For the
been.
No,
students.
Not for the students, but I'm saying for the students.
Correct.
In the past, the parents have had to pay for preschool.
Correct.
And now that's,
They have to pay for 3-year-olds.
right, it's self
for the
for that.
4-year-old
Yeah.
program.
But that's just the 4-year-old program, right? Correct?
I reference it similar to kindergarten years back.
Yep.
Kindergarten didn't start out
That way as
full
well.
funded. It started out as a part-time deal and eventually went to what we call full funding. It's not at the same level high school is, but
And are we funded for 120 kids? Is that what it is? And we can only hold 100? Is that correct?
well, the demand we only have for is 100. Now, we have 120 seats sitting there. So we could grow more for the 4-year-old. We just don't have I mean,
Space.
Space.
well, no, we've come up with space. We added a class this year from last year. We found space, made it work. We just don't have 20 more kids sitting there right now.
Oh,
And you know what I'm saying? Just like you don't have
right.
another 20 kids in fifth grade or sixth grade or whatever. But we do have, if we ever got above the 120, then, you know, but again, I keep thinking eventually the state with kindergarten, everyone will get funded, you know,
Those 120 seats are for 4-year-olds only.
4-year-old only, and we're at 105 classes.
So I think it's safe to say we're gonna have a working session.
Can we request like participants or if we can have teachers there? I guess,
Or like a town hall.
I guess we've had, and not like,
Well, it's open.
yeah, but
Yeah.
we've heard from the community and their priorities, but I think we need to hear from the professional educators of what would work in the building. Operationally,
Sure. I mean, we can ask anybody to come.
it's, yeah, it's open.
It's
Yeah,
open,
it's
it's
open.
public, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the board controls on how you interact, who interacts, you know, that type deal. Because there again, if you end up, and I guess with 200 people, you know, are you gonna allow all 200 or are you gonna, you know, ask for, you know, a rep from different grades or buildings or?
That's what might be nice if each building could have some representation there.
So if I can clarify a little bit, it was in the beginning of the year, they came and they did ask our staff, but I think where some of the confusion came from is that initial conversation and that initial opportunity for staff to have input didn't have some of these broken down specifics, and so it feels like a very large shift when we started having to talk about possibly moving. Right, I think the community still supports that importance of having preschool together, but fiscally, we were put in a tough spot and there's only so much our community would support, so we were tasked with what we have. Isn't necessarily what all of us maybe want or wish or like, probably not. Again, that was the job that we had to do. But when we did that, the impact it also had a different, bringing preschool and then shifting second and fifth impacts differently than adding an addition onto a building.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much change that happens. And so when that conversation shifted, there really wasn't a lot of conversations with that, which there's where I think you are now hearing and feeling from staff like, whoa, and that nerve. And I get that. So I don't think it was anything ill intent. I just think how things can occur. I mean, I do want to just say, like, they did give opportunity, but it just because of how things moved. Changed perspective.
Sure.
A little bit, if that makes sense.
And I would guess it's similar. I wasn't around when you went from 2 K5 elementaries to a K2, 3, 5. Yeah, I'm sure there was not 100%, you know, people in favor, people against.
Yes.
It was change. And I mean,
Change is always hard.
you know, it's,
Nice to hear.
it's the same thing if you were designing,
Yeah.
you know, new buildings and we were trying to design a 5-8 building, you know, if it was something you didn't have, you know,
Yeah.
same thing, you're gonna have some of the roller coaster. And again, we haven't, in one of the emails I replied to, we haven't had, you know, all staff in and, you know, thumbs up and because again, we haven't.
Yeah, and I don't think that would be.
Yeah.
We're not gonna get
Productive.
Yeah.
Just some representation for
Yeah.
each building would be healthy, I think. As part of
And
that
section is like for title and some for special ed too, I think would be helpful.
You know, one thing that came out of the task force that we talked about during our second meeting was specifically about the preschool, because there were some people there that were passionate about the preschool. And ultimately, the conversation was, well, we know what the tax tolerance, but why don't we just add the preschool on top of that? And then we talked about what would happen, the support that we would lose and what have you. And then the question was, well, what if we were to put the preschool, one of those additions in? But then what about the other priority items? You have 3 buildings that are aging at the same time. And you have a bunch of work that has to be done in the high school. You did a lot of great things back in 2016, 2017. But you didn't touch all of this building. There's still a lot of original mechanical, electrical, and those things that, you know, we've captured as part of this. And so the question to the task force was, certainly you can have the preschool if you want, But at the end of the day, what are you willing to give up from an infrastructure standpoint? Because regardless of what you do, it's important that we stay at that now 26.4 million. We can't exceed that. I mean, you're the board, you can do whatever you want. But your chances of passage, if we go beyond that, drop. And if we take away from the priority items, which for the people that don't have kids in the district and aren't employed by the district, which is about 70% of your voting public, it's the mechanical electrical systems, it is the plumbing, it's your roofing and those things. Cause every taxpayer, if I've, as a taxpayer here, have been, paying for your schools or paying for our schools, at the end of the day, I don't want them going to waste. I want you to maintain them. And typically that's why they're as well supported as they are. So we can do, ultimately, you're the board, we can do whatever you want. But I'd encourage you to stay at that 26.4.
Rob, what does it look like if we, these high prioritized items that the public has stated, what if we look at the option of forcing a referendum for some of those and voting on the pre-K side of it with a different option as an attached building or a higher price for pre-K?
You absolutely could. Which is a great point, Matt, and I appreciate you mentioning it, is that we could leave question 1 as it is. We talked about the third question being about preschool. When we tested it originally, it was just over $14 million, right, Kevin?
Yep.
But that was for that standalone building. If we were to focus on an addition, that number comes down to sub 8. But then it's, $8 million versus, 5.1.
Well, that 5.1 was originally 7 though, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yep. But he's,
But
I
Matt,
understand,
Matt,
but
Yep.
originally we were saying 7 for the remodel. So 8 isn't that far of a jump from 7 to think you get a whole addition.
right, and, yeah,
but then you don't change any, like in CMS, there's some remodel, like of the science rooms to, make them more of a regular size class. There's a bunch to make that 5, which again, I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Yep.
there's gives and takes.
Yep.
The piece I wanted to mention though is, and I guess I would think the board has to be very transparent.
Yeah.
That here's your total tax impact if you
Right.
support it. Whereas if, you vote for the 26 million and then we do another 5 million, and things that you could do, like,
Yeah.
say your boiler went out, you have a legal authority to replace it
Yep.
and go. Parking lots, you did that using LTFM, you could do preschool, you could do certain pieces. But you see what I'm getting at, is I don't want someone going, okay, I supported that for 25 million, but now you went and added 5-6 million. I think, if we're gonna do some of it, we gotta say, here's your total.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're voting on
Yeah.
15 and we're doing another 7 or whatever it is, so that, we're transparent on that piece.
Yeah.
Unless it's an
I agree.
emergency type thing.
Yep.
And that certainly is an option, and we talked about this very briefly last time we were together, is that you as a board, there's a lot of different funding options you have access to that you can take board approval on and increase the taxes of your public. You can certainly say that, we're going to take so many millions of dollars and we're going to do this scope of work, but we're still going to referendum and asking you for support for these other things that the public thought were high priority items. Now, we would, because transparency is important, we wouldn't hide anything. We would share with the public, this is the work that's going to happen regardless, if that's the direction you as a board decide to take, but we're going to ask you for this piece. Now, the challenge with that is, because we also have this operating levy that you're going to be asking for, is we're doing this regardless of what you say, but we want your support for the operating and we want your support for this other capital. It becomes, sometimes within the community, it creates a little of this. It's like, well, if you're going to do this anyway, well, I'm going to say no to this because you're going to do this anyway. And I don't think you would want that as your, from a working with your public standpoint.
Okay.
I
think the levy will be an easier sell when we can show the public where we're at versus all the communities around us.
And that's why we didn't put a contingency there.
Sure.
I mean, it's
100%.
my number one, and I think
Yeah.
from the people I've talked to, most people's number one is the operating.
yes,
But like I say, my first stance was that has to be contingent on, or
it has to.
two, but we've not put it there because I agree. I think when we can show here's where we are compared to every neighboring district around us, you know.
Sure.
I think I'm willing to roll the dice if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
Of course, with the farm to school, it's an easier sell with that group as well. The operating is compared to a building, referendum or bond.
Okay, I can just table the vote on this?
Yep.
Good discussion.
Are we
Yep.
gonna set a time, looking at schedules, to
Yeah.
do? Okay,
Yeah, I'll do that at the end.
okay, perfect.
8.2 is to approve a resolution relating to the non-renewal of the contract of Don Peterson, teacher, as presented and attached in board book.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. So it's a resolution, so I'll take a poll or any questions and discussion before we take a poll on this. Yep. Yes.
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 Okay, that's unanimous, 6-0, it is passed. 8.3 is to accept donations to the school district.
I'll make a motion to approve the following donations. A donation from Custom Collision to CMS for Outsiders Day in the amount of $250. Donation from EGF Boosters to the senior high for girls golf overnight, $398.04. From the East Grand Forks Arts and Crafts to the senior high for scholarships in the amount of $1,000. And a donation from American Crystal to CMS for Outsider Day in the amount of $500. Total donations today, $2,148.04.
I'll second.
Questions or discussion on donations? Okay, all those in favor of approving donations, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 9.0 is payment of claims and accounts.
I'll make the motion to approve the K-12 bills 131,837 through 131,882 and the electronic fund transfers in the amount of $1,598,329.26.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion on payment of claims and accounts? All those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 10.0 board member comments. Start with you, Matt.
Lots of good discussion tonight, Rob. I appreciate you coming and having another conversation with this, and I look forward to getting together one more time to talk about it some more.
Josh?
Just congratulations, spring sports just wrapping up. I think we still have one golfer left.
Brody.
Yeah, Brody. Brody's still out there playing. I know track and field, they had a handful of records broken, school records broken this year. Congratulations to them, and a big thank you to all the teachers and admin and staff for making it through a year, and enjoy your summer because you guys earned it.
Nothing new to add, no.
Okay, Amanda.
I'm just happy that we had the discussion that we had, and I'm excited for the working session.
Ollie?
Nothing.
No,
Everybody said it.
I think, yeah, it was all set and I didn't know we had a golfer still out there, so that's great. And thank you to all staff and admin. It was a year. So, okay, next meeting is the next regular meeting, Board of Education is June 22nd at 5:30 in this room. Let's talk about a working session.
Do you want to go? I'm just throwing out, you can do it before that
Yeah, we
meeting
Or after.
or after or whatever. I mean,
Do we need that meeting? We do it at the time.
the only thing I mentioned to Lynn was we are gonna have a few contracts and again, hopefully there's a social worker that they're offering it to right now that we're gonna want to act on as soon as we can if they accept, so that they can, resign their other position.
Okay.
Do we want to look at next Monday?
We could do next one.
We go after the 22nd, it's getting close to the 4th.
It's whatever, yeah. I mean,
Is it too soon?
I could do next Monday.
I would think, I'm looking at Nancy, I would think we'd have an answer, right, for at least that one where you're gonna have a AP contract in front of you.
Oh,
The MOU's ready to go, I mean, which doesn't have to be, but other than that, there's not, I mean, most things can wait, Depending on what comes out of, there may be some prep work,
Good.
drawings, whatever, for Nexus Monday might be.
too tough? Okay.
Like I said, the middle school drawing is pretty much done, yeah.
Yeah, we do both on the 22nd. Like if our board meeting is short, just to approve a couple of contracts and then have the working session.
It's up,
right
yeah,
after.
it's up to you. I mean, let's,
After the meeting,
Yeah, right after the meeting.
Sure.
I'm fine with that.
I'm not here that day.
The 22nd?
Can you?
We change that to a different day.
I'll be in Iceland.
So we're not. Oh, okay.
No zooming for Holly.
Not the 23rd.
Yeah, so the 23rd doesn't work either.
But you guys can have it without me.
Okay. Okay.
We'll just come up with the
20
answer or whatever, like. from
22nd will be working session afterwards. Just send your questions ahead of time if you have some. Okay. So. Next meeting of Board of Education for the regular meeting is at 5:30, working session afterwards. 12.0, I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion on that?
Only if we could email or something like people to get them to come to the working session, so we actually have input.
You can do whatever you want. All right.
Perfect.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.